A very good morning this Friday of the 4th of November 2022. I'm glad you have agreed to be part of this program this morning, Kirk in the Morning, as we seek to evaluate the state of the nation and also bring you the Entertainment Friday. Of course, this is a show that brings you all that all together, and we have a great program lined up for you this morning, even as we begin this particular broadcast. And we begin at this particular point where we take a review of what is happening on the roads, but shortly we'll also be getting into our discussion this morning, talking about different issues that are affecting the country, the state of the nation. There has been a lot to talk about all this week. All that we'll be talking about in a short while. Also, later on in the program, we'll be having the producer of Jawabu Music Productions, that is Basil, will be gracing our show this morning. So wherever you are watching us from, be free to be part of this conversation. Remember, we are streaming live on Facebook at Kirk TV Kenya, YouTube at Kirk TV Kenya, and you can leave in you can send in your feedback, and we'll be reading as we continue with our program this morning. My name is Chris Sambu. So wherever you are watching us from, welcome aboard. Let's get started to Kirk in the Morning. But first of all, things first, we do the traffic and take a look at what is happening on the major roads this morning. All right, and just to take a look at the major roads linking into the Central Business District, just to get quick, trying to look where you should be able to pass or avoid. Let me begin with Thika Road, which Thika Road doesn't look so much good, especially past survey. According to my map here, Thika Road doesn't look so much good, descending all the way to Pangani. The Muthaiga connection from Kiambu Road and Thika Superhighway is a total mess this morning. So if you can avoid Thika Superhighway, or especially towards the Muthaiga Junction, then it will be of a great importance this morning. Also taking a look at yet another road, that is Mombasa Road. Mombasa Road doesn't look so much bad. There is a traffic flow, as well as the Nairobi Expressway, which looks so much good this morning. So if you're using those two roads, then you are guaranteed to on a safe, smooth travel. As well as Ngong Road doesn't look so much bad, despite different snarl-ups at different points, especially when you descend down towards Upper Hill. There is a little bit of a snarl-up there, as well as the different junctions connecting Ngong Road with different feeder roads all the way. That is Ngong Road, which doesn't look so much good this morning with these different traffic snarl-ups at different points right about there. And that is if you can be able to avoid Ngong Road, especially when you are getting towards Upper Hill, then you will be on safer grounds to get where you are going safe and sound. Taking a look at yet another road, I'll take a look at Jogoo Road. Jogoo Road doesn't look so much bad, but just right from Makadara, the traffic flow is quite slow moving all the way entering to the Central Business District. Doesn't look so much good. There is a little bit of snarl up there, the traffic moving slowly. That is the Jogoo Road. Take a look, just take a look at the Central Business District. Now the Central Business District looks like there is a lot of movement at the Central Business District, or Haile Selassie Avenue, the major avenue linking into the Central Business District, Moi Avenue as well. Just looking at Luthuli Avenue, there is a lot of movement in the Central Business District. So if you're getting into town, then expect a lot of movement right about there this Friday morning. Seems to be a lot of movement, especially with the rainy season. And that is how the Central Business District looks like. Thika Road doesn't look so much good. Langata Road looks so much good this morning. Ngong Road has some different snarl-ups at different points. It doesn't look so much good as you get to Upper Hill, as well as Mombasa Road. And that is what is happening on the major roads this morning. We'll be trying to check later on if we can be able to inform you on what is happening as well on the roads. But that is how the roads look like this morning and this particular minute, 20 minutes past 8 a.m. in the morning this Friday. All right, and now getting into our discussion, there is a lot to talk about, in regards to the state of the nation. That is much that has been happening, especially in the formation of the government, and also different matters that have been raised, especially issue dealing with the extrajudicial killings. A big statement coming out yesterday from Azimio Moja leader Raila Odinga. We'll be talking about that in the next 1 hour as we seek, to understand where is the country heading to, and so far, how's the government performed. But first of all, let's take a look at what the newspapers have written this morning. All right, with me I have two newspapers, the Daily Nation and the Standard newspaper, which have a very strong headline right there, and that is why I want to introduce my guests, this morning. Welcome, and feel free to be part of this particular discussion. Karibu sana, Musa Sala.
Thank you for having me, please.
Just to introduce you formally, Musa Sala is a communication strategist and also as political commentation. So welcome this morning. Looking at this particular, newspapers, I know you've had a glimpse of them as well this morning. The Daily Nation talking about we are under pressure to frame Kinoti. Of course, that is the ongoing, probe on the extrajudicial killings. The DCI officers implicated in that particular, probe. 9 officers of the disbanded Special Service Unit accused of killing 2 Indians and their taxi driver tell court their arrest is politically instigated to settle scores, and that they are being pushed to implicate former Director of Criminal Investigations George Kinoti in exchange to their freedom. That particular story, strong statement as well coming out yesterday from the Azimio Moja that these are political witch hunt. What do you make of this entire, probe?
What do I think? Just that, a political witch hunt. In my view, and I've always told in some of my opinion pieces in the dailies, I've always said, even if it is going after Kinoti, Kinoti was an appointee of the president. The DCI remains an appointee of the president, just like the deputy president appointed a new DCI. It means George Kinoti was following orders from President Uhuru Kenyatta. I mean, if you want to go after now the ghosts, we must go for the roots. If you are cutting the tree, we must aim for the roots and not the twigs. So for me, I think going after Kinoti is just making yourself so busy and of course distracting the government from what it is supposed to do. I mean, we've not seen much from the political promises the UDA government made. I mean, you heard of the youth fund, the Hustler fund. You heard of the introduction of more taxes. I mean, this is just basically a decoy from basically to distract the government from doing its mandate and, of course, fulfilling its political promises.
And even as you talk about it being a politically instigated probe, looking at the bigger picture, do you agree that this probe is right on time? That we need to, put an end to the extrajudicial killings?
Okay, I can say, coming from, of course, one of the communities that has majorly suffered extrajudicial killings. I mean, it is right to go after those rogue cops, but at the same time, look at the timing, as you've said. It just comes immediately after the president and his deputies were sworn in. It means this is just going after ghosts that may not be there. You open the closet and you don't find any ghosts. So the timing for me is just a political witch hunt. Going after, I can say the president is using DCI and other security agencies to settle political scores. And for me, just looking at the time, I can say it's just all about settling political scores. Remember, President, of course, William Ruto, has had his own fair share of dealings with the DCI and, of course, the security agencies before. He's been humiliated as deputy president. And for me now, especially by DCI, George Kinoti, And now it seems that he's trying to have his now comeback and show who the boss is.
Talking about that, let's listen in to what the leader of Azimio la Umoja, Raila Odinga, had to say in regards, to the ongoing probe on extrajudicial killings.
We're also concerned about the so-called probe into extrajudicial executions, which is turning into a witch hunt against the former DCI boss, Mr. George Kinoti, and some few police officers. Let's be clear on the so-called extrajudicial executions. As a party, we believe in the sanctity of life of every Kenyan. As we have said time and again, we believe in the rule of law. We believe in the due process. Naturally, therefore, we are opposed to extrajudicial executions in our country because our supporters have been the greatest victims over the years. We believe that all, not some, cases of real or suspected extrajudicial executions need to be investigated and those responsible punished. We are, however, firmly opposed to the current trend directed by a vindictive regime that the president that seems to be pursuing a personal vendetta against specific current and past state officers in the pretext of pursuing extrajudicial executions.
Mr. Sir, what do you make of those statements by the leader of Azimio la Umoja? Of course, he's coming out strongly to defend the former DCI George Kinoti, as well as also understanding the aspect that the extrajudicial killings have been in existence, despite him coming to defend the person now implicated. What do you make of Odinga's remarks?
First, let me say that covert operations have always been there, the world over. Whether you go to the US, whether you go to Israel, any government has covert operations, has special units that conduct these operations. But now, coming out and going for the DCI, going after the 9 people, the 9 suspects, the 9 DCI officers suspected of killing 2 gentlemen who are working for President William Ruto and their driver, is just, it's just a pin lost in the ocean. Because what happens now is, number one, what I make of it is, number one, we are going after these 9 officers, number one, because they are accused of killing foreigners. These 2 Indians were foreigners working for for President William Ruto. That is one. So what can we say then, that what happens to Onyango, what happens to Mohammed, what happens to Mutua, what happens to Kamau when they are killed and their bodies retrieved dumped and retrieved in Rivayala and some of the forests here in the country? Then it means if we will only be going after these rogue cops when they kill foreigners only, then it means there is no hope for the locals, the Kenyans who suffer at the hands of our police officers. So for me, I think Right Honorable Raila Odinga is right in some way, in the sense that if we are going for, if we are introducing reforms in the security sector, we must aim for the roots, as I've said earlier, because we must investigate the other cases. Remember, we've had Chris Musando, we've had some of the babies that were shot during 2017, we've had killings in the 2007 post-election violence, we've had killings during the 2017 and 2013 demonstrations. So I think a lot of people have been killed at the hands of the police. They must be investigated. Those cases must be investigated. But I'm saying that we need not to ensure that we use the judicial, the justice system to settle political scores, and at the same time treat everyone fairly and squarely.
And talking about that, is it not a wake-up call that if you are involved in the extrajudicial killing, maybe the government is trying to send a message that you would be held responsible? Do you buy to that?
For me, I think, number one, this is just not to send a message. If you are doing reforms, and this is what of course, the Kenya Kwanza government must really be doing is ensuring that they implement policies. It's not just, a photo op where you go after now somebody who has left office to bring out ghosts from the closet. I mean, those are bygones. Let bygones be bygones. Introduce policies. You recently saw the government is planning to introduce body cameras on police officers and KRA officials. Those are the kind of things now will ensure that some of these killings are reduced and they never happen again.
And let's take a look at yet another story here by the Daily Nation, which is in regards to what transpired yesterday, the probing of former Jubilee Party chairman David Murathe was probed yesterday by the EACC in regards to some 25 million shillings over some millions of shillings. And the Daily Nation talks about millions Mr. Murathe is said to have received from politician Cyrus Jirongo on July 23, 2020. The anti-graft agency EACC wants the former Jubilee Party chairman to explain what it was for, and that is in regards to the accusation of Cyrus Jirongo that he was involved in a land fraud in the capital city. And that story there is written by the Daily Nation. It talks about that story in depth on page 4, where it talks about what really transpired, and the EACC probing over 200 million shilling land saga. So the commission wants the former Jubilee vice chairperson, that is David Murathe, to explain the purpose on why he received 25 million of the biggest share of 250 million from Cyrus Jirongo. These are government. All these people that are were interrogated. Cyrus Jirongo, David Murathe, Francis Atwoli is expected also to be interrogated by the EACC. These are close former president allies. What do you make of the current probe on them as well?
Look at the timing again. This comes in just barely a month after President William Ruto and Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua took office. At the same time, let me say that land has always been a critical issue in the country. It's very inflammatory, especially when you mention, lands, illegal taking of lands is very inflammatory in terms of, it is a very controversial matter. At the same time, remember Murathe says that it is money that Jirongo had borrowed and was just paying back. If you look at now those allegations that he's saying, those claims, I mean, if I sent you some money today, if you came and borrowed me some money and I lent you the money, and you came back and of course gave it back to me, and I don't have any business explaining to the government what that money is for. It is an arrangement between you and I, and we made it in private, and we must settle it in private. So I think not just Atwoli, not just Murathe, they've also gone for, former Interior Cabinet Secretary Dr. Fred Matiang'i is also in the mix. And I think, you see, it doesn't mean that they're giving an impression that it is only those who are allied to Azimio that are corrupt in this country. Why can't we see other cases? Remember in 2013 and 2017, we saw the NYS scandal bringing in new faces. The likes of, I can't really remember, Anne Greta and so on. We saw new faces that are not particularly allied to a particular coalition. But now when you go after individuals that used to speak so heavily against you, so publicly against you, that it tells us one thing, that you're just there to settle political scores. And my plea is just to urge the government, President William Ruto, to go and do what Kenyans elected him to do, not just political sideshows. You promised us, you met with women, you met with youthful groups, you met with political leaders, you went into the grassroots. Now you have the chance to go and do what you promised us, not just waste 5 years in terms of giving us sideshows and photo ops, and coming back into 2027 to give you another chance. That, I mean, for me, this whole is just a circus, and they say when you take a circus to, when you take a clown, you know, to a stadium, the stadium doesn't become a football stadium or whatever, it becomes a circus. So I think this whole thing is just a circus and a political witch hunt, and rightfully I agree for the first time with the opposition that if they're going for, if you are trying to implement new policies, go for the policies, not the people who are in office. I'm sure, as we speak, I'm sure those people who are holding those government offices had orders from their bosses. Go for the bosses if you really want to go, settle this thing once and for all. Not the, of course they have people working for them, the foot soldiers. Go for the big fish, as we always say. I mean, that's all I can say about this court case.
How difficult is it to go for the big fish in Kenya? Because that has proven to be very difficult.
I think this is leading to what we used to hear during the campaigns. Remember, during the campaigns, we used to hear allegations that Kenya Kwanza, once they go into government, once the Kenya Kwanza government is sworn into office, they will go after President Uhuru Kenyatta. And I see this going to that direction. At one point, if it were not for respecting the office of the president just as an institution, I am sure by now we would have former President Uhuru Kenyatta in some of this saga. Yeah.
And talking about that, you know, it's inevitable that corruption has to be fought from all ends. And as you speak and as you say, that this could be a politically instigated, you know, fight against corruption. Then, if so, how dangerous is it for, you know, for the government as well, and also for the state of the nation?
It is very dangerous. To me, when you go for people who've held government offices, you are not just going after those individuals. I mean, you're going after the institution. Remember, these institutions have taken more than 60 years to build them. So when you mar and, you know, try to dirtify the image of those institutions, then, I mean, you're crippling the government in some way. So, I mean, we've always had cases or issues with the office of the DCI and the office of the DPP. Why? Because the DPP usually do investigations. I mean, the DCI usually does the investigations for the cases to the DPP and of course, for prosecution. But in most cases, you'll find that by the time the DCI submits their argument to the DPP, there is no case. There are no thorough investigations done. You will hear somebody has been arrested on a Friday, released on Monday, simply because it was a political operation. It was a covert political operation to put somebody in bad light. So for me, I think this thing is so dangerous to the extent that it can destroy the government of the day.
And talking about that, the story on page 10 of the Daily Nation talks about the recent visit by the Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua in Mombasa. And now he says, the Daily Nation reports there and talks about, you know, heads to roll at Ports Agency as DP Rigathi Gachagua reveals looming probe. And Gachagua says the president has ordered an audit on operations of the country's 4 ports, which are in Mombasa, amid allegation of you know, misappropriation of funds as well, and also some corruption dealings within the ports. That is a probe that is also coming timely, and looking at what the government is now doing. We've had what has come out from the ports and different accusations of corruption dealings at the ports, and now the tendering of the ports as well. You know, someone being tendered to you know, talk about fund that particular project. They don't fund, but the money was remitted by the government. What do you make, you know, of this purge now, which is coming, especially when you target the ports which have been the center of conversation?
Number one, I would like to laud the Kenya Kwanza government for reverting the port operations back to Mombasa. The port business is a multi-billion-dollar industry that has the ability to fund Kenya's budget. I mean, it is, if you go to the port of Mombasa today, and of course the new port in Lamu, there is a beehive of activities, goods coming in and going out of the country. So I mean, that first is basically safeguarding the economy, the blue economy of the coast region. That is number one. So many jobs were lost. We had trucks lying around. If you went to Malaba, if you went to, the border points, you would see so many lorries lined up, not because they want to exit the country, but because they are waiting for jobs. That is number one. So many jobs have been restored. Number two, now the problem that I have with these new audits and misappropriation of funds and so on, I mean, corruption is everywhere in this country. I'm sure if you went to the office of the president today, you'll find so many corruption scandals. But the issue now is, look at the timing. If you really thought there is misappropriation of funds at the port, I mean, go do your investigations. Give us credible information that, hey, we did ABCD and we found out that maybe X billion shillings were stolen in the port of Mombasa. Then we will say, by the way, that could be true. And of course, we'll give the courts and the judiciary their time to give their findings. But the timing again, remember, the port of Mombasa and the whole coast region is a region allied to former Prime Minister Raila Odinga. And again, this is just to punish those, again, to settle political scores, to punish the opposition. But remember, as you try to punish the opposition, you're not punishing the opposition. I mean, Raila Odinga is a billionaire. Former Mombasa Governor Hassan Joho is a billionaire. You're not punishing those guys. All you're trying to do is punishing Hussein or Juma, who lives in Mombasa and has to go to the port every day, use the ferry every day, and try to get his 100 shillings or 50 shillings every day to give to feed his family.
And talking about that, we can take a listen into what the Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua said while in Mombasa. If we have that clip, then we can play and listen in to what Gachagua said, while in Mombasa.
Ilikuwa imepotea, imesukumwa, mumepata shida mingi, na yule mlikuwa mnachagua alikuwa amenyamaza. Lakini tangu tuchukue ushukani, agizo la kwanza la rais mpya wa Jamhuri ya Kenya ni bandari ilegeshwe hapa Mombasa, na imelegeshwa. Na kwa hivyo tuna matumaini ya kwamba uchumi wa pwani utafufuka. Na hivi karibuni nimemwambia gavana, mimi mwenyewe nitapata nafasi tukuje na hawa viongozi tuzunguke bandari tukiangalia vile biashara inaendelea, kwa sababu tunataka kufufua uchumi wa hapa pwani. Tungetaka, we would like to confirm to the people of Coast Region that the Ruto administration has thwarted the attempts to steal the port of Mombasa by the lords of impunity, state capture, and conflict of interest. And I would like to thank the board of directors of the Kenya Port Authority for their patriotism, because they refused to allow the stealing of the port of Mombasa. President William Ruto has already directed the new CS for Transport and Roads, Kipchumba Murkomen, to do an audit of the port facilities and establish what else has been stolen by the lords of impunity, state capture, and conflict of interest.
Sasala, what do you make of that?
I was just laughing. Let me take you back to what Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua said, that the Ruto administration has thwarted efforts to steal the Mombasa port. I mean, look at just that statement. It has all the hallmarks of a headline of a tabloid. I mean, this is a government propaganda. It's a state propaganda, trying to sell now Kenya Kwanza as the savior of the day. Remember, you have no business in looking back when you're trying to move forward. If you're trying to move Kenya forward, forget about the past. Let bygones be bygones. Deal with the situation. When you come in and of course you find a lot of debts, a lot of things not going the way you wanted, all you have to do is just make sure everything is in place and move forward. You don't reverse and move forward. It's just like a drunkard in the drinking dance, going home making 2 steps backwards and 1 step forward. I mean, this is a state propaganda, and the earlier the Kenya Kwanza government realizes that they need to do work for the Kenyan people, the better, because we will waste 3 years trying to accuse and of course point fingers to the previous regime, that we would have lost a lot of time that we would have used to work for the Kenyan people.
How do you make, on that note, how do you make, or rather, what do you make of, the conduct of the government as well, in regards to their few months that they have been in office, especially when we see now the purge on the security reforms, as well as, trying to reform some crucial government sectors, the formation of government as well. What do you make of the conduct of the government in the few months that have been in office?
Some, to be honest, I haven't seen any reforms. All I've seen is a change of guard in terms of the ministries, the PSS, and so on and so forth. We haven't seen any reforms yet, but I'm sure once the government settles, because at the same time, we may be criticizing the Kenya Kwanza administration so far, but 60 days is just so little time to make reforms in the government. I mean, let's wait and see until the government settles, the ministers settle, the PSS settle, the chief administrative secretaries settle, and then we can say, we can begin to point accusing fingers on the Kenya Kwanza administration. But in terms of reforms, we hoped so much for the Hustler Fund. I'm sure, of course, the Hustler narrative is what put President William Ruto into office. But again, that is a reform that we expected, but so many of us have been shocked. You remember during the campaigns, it was a free Hustlers Fund, and then the president said it won't be free, and now it is interest loan that basically youths can access. And by the time I did my calculations and found out that if you took 100 shillings from the Hustlers Fund, 100,000 shillings from the Hustlers Fund, you would end up with 30,000 shillings as the fund to set up your business.
How is that calculation, from 100,000 to 30,000?
Again, you're trying to create opportunities for the millions of unemployed Kenyans in the country. At the same time, you're subjecting them to, first of all, an interest-free loan that you claimed that now turns out to have interest. Number two, you're trying to establish, trying to tax a starving economy more. If you're a business operator in Nairobi, you have a shop or whatever, and you look at the amount of tax that you pay, it's crazy. I mean, you pay over 100 forms of tax. Remember, double taxation and so on and so forth. Just the the Nairobi City County Council claims about 10 licenses. At the end of the month, if you do your calculations, I mean, the government is ripping you off. So I mean, the government, in terms of creating opportunities for the youth, of course the tax reforms are very, very good in terms of moving the country forward. But right now it is misplaced in terms of first give the youth, create job opportunities. When you ensure that everyone has jobs, then you can begin to introduce tax reforms.
But the president argues that we need to raise, revenue, as much revenue as we can in the shortest period of time, and for that to happen, then we need to reduce our borrowing and expand, the taxation of the country, especially on areas that have not been targeted for taxing. Or is it not so?
What are those areas that haven't been targeted?
Especially when it talks about, now begin taxation of imported cosmetics, increasing, the contribution of the NSSF and NHIF as well as that. Don't you see that is an effort, to increase the country's revenue? Do you buy to the president's
Let me
idea?
give you a scenario. Let me give you a scenario, because I'm sure every Kenyan does budgeting of some sort in their homes. If you earn 100,000 shillings and you are sure you have no way of getting another extra coin from anywhere else, what do?
You budget the 100,000.
You budget that 100,000 shillings. You don't try and say, I'll use that 100,000 shillings, put a bet on a football team that is playing. Of course, you'll end up losing everything. What you have to do, number one, is reorganize. Because currently, the 1.3 trillion budget that we have is half of it goes to recurrent expenditure. What is recurrent expenditure? It is the amount of money that you use to, you know, kujishikilia as a government, pay some employees here, some pay for vehicle and maintenance and so on, fuel and so on. What you have to do is now reduce that cost, reduce your recurrent expenditure to about a quarter, and use the remaining money to fund your projects. I mean, how can you introduce tax to people who have no jobs? The current tax bracket for KRA is somebody who is earning, I think, 25,000, 25,000 shilling, 25,001 shilling. Meaning, anybody who earns less than 25,000 cannot be taxed. I mean, what will you be taxing from 25,000 shillings really, especially if you live in Nairobi? So it becomes very hard for, I mean, even if you collected tax from 25,000 shillings, it's going to be about 5 cents, half a shilling. So what will half a shilling benefit the government?
Incredible.
It's a drop in the ocean. So I mean, if the government, if President Ruto is very serious about introducing reforms in terms of keeping the budget within its limit, it needs to reduce the recurrent expenditure. In terms of, number one, we haven't seen the president taking a pay cut since COVID-19. We are going through a recession. We haven't seen the MPs taking a pay cut. In as far as I'm concerned, the SRC, the Salaries and Remuneration Commission chair, increased her salary upwards. We've seen MPs now claiming they want their allowances restored. I mean, this is a government that is trying to rob off the people and at the same time put the blame on Kenyans. I mean, it is high time that if you go to other developed countries, if you go to the UK, if you go to the US, a public officer cannot, I mean, it's very ridiculous for a government officer to earn a lump sum amount of money as their salary, not even talking of their allowances. If you go to Kenya, if you come back to Kenya, I mean, everybody wants to be in politics, number one. Why? Because it is a lucrative occupation. You get access to tenders, and you are paid nearly hundreds and thousands of shillings just for sitting in parliament and talking.
The president, talked about reducing the cost of living, and that was his major points that he made, especially when he was seeking that particular seat, as well as when he got to the office. But at some point, he finds it very difficult, to overturn what perhaps seems to be the high burden of economy in the country, rising food prices and all that. For now, he faces it very hard and very difficult because the prices have not gone down yet. What do you say would be his starting point, especially in a situation like this, far from what he has prioritized?
Number one, I think, of course, the president needs more time. Let's be honest. You can't reduce the cost of manufacturing, the cost of production, in 60 days or in 100 days. It is very impossible. Given the global factors and what is happening in Russia and Ukraine, it is very hard. So number one, let's be patient and give President Kenyatta and his administration the 1 year that he said. Number two, what he needs to prioritize is the cost of production. I mean, in Kenya, the cost of electricity is up, right? And if you look at the cost of production, it is also up. In terms how the question that we need urgent answers to is why Kenya, the cost of fuel in Kenya is so high compared to Uganda, which is far away from the port of Mombasa. They use our port of Mombasa. They use our whatever, our roads to ferry that fuel to Uganda. And at the same time, it is very cheap in Uganda. It is very cheap in Ethiopia. Why? Number one is taxes. I mean, of course you can have the same taxes, but take those taxes from fuel and put them elsewhere, put them in liquor, put them in other things, even tax petroleum more, so that people can afford diesel and kerosene and so forth. So the issue is basically to reduce the cost of production. Remember when fuel used to be 50 shillings, you would get your packet of milk at half the price it is right now. Your packet of bread at half the price it is retailing for now. So the huge challenge that President William Ruto has is reducing the cost of production. Everything else will tank once this cost of production is reduced.
But how long is that going to take? Because you understand the impatience of Kenyans in that things should change as soon as possible, because that is what you promised us. How far is that when we say that now the cost of production must come down for the prices to reduce?
With the right policies and implementation of those policies, it won't take the year that President William Ruto says he needs. But in real sense, expect about 3 years to be spent in trying, not reducing, in trying to reduce the cost of production. I think this will go on until 2027. So brace yourself and expect an increase in some of the basic commodities.
And if you look at the entire discussion and conversation, it is about the cost of living, and the government has now said that they're going to target the local production, and especially when it comes to food production and all that. We are not going to do anything to do with subsidy and trying to put in some cash that will save the Kenyan people. We need them to begin that reduction of commodity prices right from the farm. The farmers beginning doing their farming. That is where the cost of living now starts to reduce. Do you buy to that, or should we at first deal with the situation as it is, accept that our production is below the mark, and then now we need to find what we can do to perhaps boost our commodity prices?
Number one, things are already cheap when it comes from the farm. I know of a businessman who buys a packet, a gunia, a sack of potatoes, or say avocados, at roughly about a quarter the price, and exports it, selling it for 3 times more than what he bought. So at the farmer's level, everything is cheap. But now introduce the tax, introduce the transport cost, introduce the brokerage fee, and so on, and you realize everything is expensive. At some point, yes, the farmer, you remember the farming has been advanced in this time and age. We are using, a lot of mechanical things in the farms, in terms of tractors, in terms of machineries that need fuel and so on. So if the price of fuel is still high, then expect the farmer to sell you that sack of maize, that sack of potatoes at a little bit more expensive than what you used to buy. And meaning when it gets to the factories, it will be priced higher than usual. So all in all, it all boils down to reducing the cost of production. That is the elephant in the room that needs to be addressed.
Talking about cost of production, we are taking a very short commercial break, and then when we return back, we'll be talking about the formation of government. It's talked about what is expected in the next 3 years, and the government is now in full formation. What is awaiting is the appointment of the permanent secretaries. We'll be coming back to talk about that. Don't go far away. Stay with us. Be part of this discussion. Continue sending in your feedback. We are streaming live on Facebook, YouTube at Kirk TV Kenya. I'll be reading your feedback as we come back in the second session. But for now, we take a very short commercial break. Stay with us. We'll be right back shortly.
year at Kirk TV, the season of cheer and goodies. Are you a church organization and would like to air your end of year and New Year services? Are you thinking of reaching a wider audience and showcasing your Christmas cantatas and concerts? Have you thought about showcasing your Sunday school services to the entire country? Then, Kirk TV is offering you the end year advert bonanza. We will cover and broadcast all the above events at up to 50% off our normal rates starting this October till January 2023. Usiwachwe nyuma hii Krisi. Call our sales team now on 0738 278 506 or 0739 971 607. Send an email bnkoge@kirktv.org or munyoroku@kirktv.org for more information. Hurry and book now. Pamoja tuvuke mwaka. It's the Kirk TV End Year New Year Advert Bonanza.
Nitafanya kazi ya Bwana, nitafanya kazi, fanya kazi ya Bwana, nitafanya kazi, fanya kazi ya Bwana.
PCEA Communication Department is a department under the church mandated to sell and not limited to clergy outfit, inspirational books, practice and procedure, PP, diaries, calendars, church group equipment, among other church items. 2023 diaries and calendars will be available for sale starting this November. To book yours, call 0715 376 342 or 0727 559 935. Send an email pceajitegemeapress@yahoo.com.
All right, welcome back again as we continue this particular discussion on the state of the nation. This is Kirk in the morning. As we go on now, taking a look at the formation of the government that has been the cause in the last few weeks. So the swearing in of cabinet secretaries as well into the cabinet. But what has followed up that is the appointment of the permanent secretaries. President William Ruto releasing 51 names to Parliament that will be, vetted and as permanent secretaries. And just coming to you, Musa Salah, you saw the list of, the permanent secretaries. And just to begin, look at this: 250 members, or rather Kenyans, shortlisted for the position of the PM permanent secretary, or the principal secretary. Out of the 250, 51 of them are now appointed. But if you look at the 51 of them, you do not see any new faces. Especially look at the rewarding of politicians who lost their quest for different seats in the August polls, as well as also retaining those that have been around for quite some time and rewarding those that have been part of the present project. What do you make of the 51 names appointed as principal secretaries?
First, let me say this joke. The 250 candidates that were shortlisted were only hopefuls. Now, remember, we used to have the hopefuls and the candidates. The hopefuls are those who do not have any chance of getting appointed, and the candidates who are the people who have a shot at getting this thing. But let me say something critical here. The state departments, the PSs, are very critical in every ministry. It is not the ministers that do the most of the legwork in these ministries. It is the principal secretaries. And so when it comes, remember, there are some people on social media that were saying nearly half of the PSs were people from President William Ruto's backyard. And in some way, those are powerful ministries. You need people that you can trust running those ministries. It is not just any Tom, Dick, and Harry that can come to a powerful ministry. You need people that you trust running the treasury. You need people that you can trust running some of these critical ministries. But remember, it's also, there is no need for you to apply for a job that you know the probability of you getting that job is nearly zero. I mean, Kenyans are people who try their luck, but sometimes, I mean, sometimes we joke too much. I mean, we raise our hopes so much that 250 people can be shortlisted, and at the end, about 52 of you get selected and appointed to some of these chances. Remember, in Kenya, it is not what you know, it is who you know. So if you do not have connections, especially for these some of these political posts, then, my friend,
very difficult.
Yeah, very difficult.
And if you look at the appointment of these names that they were forwarded to Parliament, some familiar names talk about the rewarding of just in quotes failed politicians in their quest to become leaders in their respective positions. Nixon Korir, the immediate former Langata member of Parliament, is a part of the appointment as well. Also the rewarding of former Laikipia West MP, who is now the PS for Defense, Mararo. Look at the composition of these particular names. Look at the composition of these particular persons. Not any new picture, or rather any new person in the government. What do you make of the names that were put out by the president, especially the rewarding of these politicians, while you say the position of the PS is a very critical position?
I wouldn't say it is rewarding allies and cronies. For me, I look at politics as a game of chess. When you play a game of chess, you have to know your next move. If this one fails, then what is your plan B? Remember, politics is a profession like any other. I'm sure you wake up every morning and come to your office, and you have a plan B and say, what happens if one day I'm laid off? Then I must have a plan B. So for me, politics, the allies that you say made a lot of investment in President William Ruto. So huge investments that he cannot let them lay in the cold alone. So I think it is just, and remember, it is all about people you trust again. If you have somebody totally new to you that you are giving a job, I mean, you must be a fool to give that person a job. You must be able to know who you're dealing with. You must have worked with this person before that you can trust him or her to give that job. So for me, it is not just rewarding. It is people close to you. People, remember, there's supposed to be chemistry between you two. And that is partially why the former regime, Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto, failed in their government to some extent. So there must be chemistry. You must understand each other. You must have worked well before, and you must have trust between yourselves, so that you can do the work that you've been given to do, basically.
The discussion around these particular names, I'm just looking at the 51 names, the discussion around that immediately when the president released these names and submitted them to Parliament for consideration on his appointments, the composition of the principal secretaries was that this is not the face of Kenya. There is a lot of, tribalism there, the number of certain tribes, have been neglected and all that. What do you make of that?
Number one, personally speaking, not from a professional point of view, I think I come from one of the marginalized communities in the country, and I think President William Ruto has been through thick and thin with us in terms of these appointments. But that said and done, professionally, I think, let me just say this, wouldn't we be tribal if we made sure every tribe is accounted for? Because every time we don't appoint everyone, remember these are just 52 appointments. The cabinet, there are 21 or 22 members of the cabinet, and we have over 43. Some of the other tribes are not known. We have over 43 tribes. I mean, how can you constitute a whole cabinet that consists of 22 members and try to fit 43 communities in that cabinet? It is very impossible. Let's be logical. And of course, every community, we may not have a doctor in every community. We may not have an engineer in every community, the best of the best. So it is we who push the government to make appointments to go for technocrats. But at the same time, we are the ones who say we need somebody from our community in that docket simply because he comes from our community and not because he's qualified to do that work. So let's be realistic. Let's give the government of the day a chance to work. And of course, those who have not been represented, I'm sure the president has an idea of how to place them in the coming appointment. Remember, we are not done. We have CASs coming up. We have other, parastatal heads of parastatals and board members coming up. So let's be patient and give the president a lot of time to do what he promised us.
So according to you, the composition of the principal secretaries was a balanced composition?
It wasn't balanced. But remember, you can't make everything balanced. All I'm saying is it wasn't balanced, and the president knows that. But let's give the president chance. Let's give the president time to make more appointments, because this is not the last. There are more appointments coming, and I'm sure the president knows that there are communities that have been forgotten in quotes, and who will be included in the upcoming appointments.
Okay, that is well noted. Let's take a look at the most crucial ministries and the most important ministries, especially that of education, given to Mashogu. Ezekiel Mashogu is now heading that particular ministry, and also the move by the president, to revert back and retain some of the PSS that were in the previous government, especially that of Dr. Belio Kipsang, and taking him back to the basic education. What do you see, and buy from that, the retaining of principal secretaries of a regime that, according to the current president, underperformed and left the country, dilapidated and all that? What do you make, when the president now says that I will retain these particular permanent secretaries?
Of the list of the retained, I think there are about 9. Of the list of retained PSs, I think Belio Kipsang was the right choice. I mean, the president, in fact, that is the most underrated PS I've ever seen in this country. If there's somebody who needs to be rewarded for sheer hard work, it is Belio Kipsang. I mean, Belio Kipsang has been the brain behind the Ministry of Education. It hasn't been Professor Magoha, it hasn't been the previous ministers that came into office. It has always been, if you talk about early child ECD, if you talk about the new curriculum CBC, it has always been Belio Kipsang. So for me, I think, regardless of what you believe about the previous regime, I mean, you must reward hard work. And if there's somebody who needs to be rewarded, it is Belio Kipsang. I mean, by this time, I thought Belio Kipsang would be CS education. But at the same time, you've mentioned the Machogu and the new education CS. That has raised, or rather caused turbulence within the opposition and ODM. Remember, you saw former Kisii governor and deputy chair ODM resigning from the party simply because they were dissatisfied with ODM. And that appointment, particularly with President William Ruto appointing people now from Nyanza and the larger Nyanza region and Western region, was a tactic to get support from that region. So I think some of these appointments are political, some of them reward hard work, and I think the president is so clear on this that 2027 is coming into play in these appointments.
Just looking at these particular names, because I also see the president in the Ministry of Housing retained Charles Singer, was part of the previous government as well, and as well as appointing Professor Edward Kisiangani to the Broadcasting and Telecommunications State Department, and just looking at yet another appointee, Jonathan Mweke, now the first former Nairobi deputy governor, and he tried to vie for the Kitui gubernatorial seat, but unsuccessful. Jonathan Mweke, coming back to the public service, especially being appointed in the Ministry of Sports and Art. Could we say that as well is also a reward? Or, if you look at the Ministry of Sports carries the youth, and we all know, someone who told me that someone can be, is a guest I hosted here and said that Ababu Namwamba is a youthful, CS, but he's not a youth.
He's youthful. I think the secret is to maintaining your body and maintaining your lifestyle, just to appear youthful. I know people who dye their hair black because they have gray hair, just to remain youthful, to look youthful. But in terms of these appointments, again, I must caution the government that rewarding allies or recycling losers in elections can be very disastrous. Remember, these people were rejected by the electorate. These people were political failures in quotes. It doesn't mean they are failures, but they were rejected by voters in particular constituencies, in particular counties. And so recycling those people into government, or rather giving them a position in government, means that you're inviting trouble in your government. Because I'm sure the people knew better, and they saw a better chance to give somebody else a chance rather than electing that person. So I think if at the same time, I'm sure appointments are made in the sense that if things were to go wrong in a particular ministry, then you'll always have somebody to blame in terms of their appointments, in terms of their qualifications. I'm sure 3-4 years from now, you'll hear a lot of allegations and scandals because somebody didn't have papers. And yet you knew this person didn't have papers, but it was a scapegoat. Remember, some of these powerful ministries get the most funding in all of the ministries. And so when you hear stories like 2 billion shillings lost in a day in the country, then you must also know that there are cartels in play who are eyeing that 2 billion shillings per day and make sure it continues for the next 5 years.
2 PSS in each and every ministry. What is the president trying to achieve in that, and especially even other ministries with 3?
I wouldn't say it is the ministry, it is the president per se, but it is the work involved in a particular ministry. You may find that, remember, these ministries were so many, about 30 of them during the Grand Coalition government, during Mzee Mwai Kibaki's regime, that is the first term and the second term. These had 30 cabinet ministers plus assistant ministers. That is because they were individual, particular ministries. Right now you have a ministry called Gender, Public Service, Affirmative Action. Those are 3 ministries combined into one. So it means it must have three state departments, and every state department now needs a principal secretary that can be able to control. Basically, is a mini minister in that state department. So it is not by the doing of the president, but by the bulk of work that is needed to make sure that everything is running efficiently within the government.
The bigger question would be like, for us to have all those, say the permanent principal secretaries, the composition of our cabinet, is it a cabinet that is fully conclusive, or rather fully constituted on what really affects the country and should be targeted to be achieved in the government tenure?
In terms of constitution, in terms of having the right ministries, I think it does to some extent. But constitution, in terms of whether it meets the legal threshold and so on. Remember, President William Ruto, when he met the women caucus in a meeting somewhere, he promised the women of Kenya 50% in cabinet appointments. Out of the 22, we have about 11 women in the cabinet. So I think the president is falling short of his promises. He definitely falls short in terms of meeting the two-third gender rule. So I think there are other legal perspectives into this, but in terms of having the right cabinet ministries, then I think we have the right cabinet ministries to tackle the current issues facing the country.
What would you say should be the first? If you look at the composition of the government as of now, the government is now fully constituted without any person that the president does not need in his government. What should the cabinet and the government at large, prioritize when you look at all these ministries, the 22 of them?
There's a saying that ikuje vile itakuja. In real sense, governments have priorities. I'm not disputing that fact, but you handle things as they come. Right now, we have one of the the hardest drought we've ever had in this country. So I think that is an issue. I saw yesterday Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua saying 2.5 million livestock have been lost in this drought. And that is not just a mere number. Remember, Defense Cabinet Secretary Eden Duale got the 800 billion plus wealth status owing to the number of camels and goats and other livestock that he owns. So 2.5 million livestock is a lot, and a lot of school-going children in particular have been affected. A lot of women have been affected. People are dying. Children are malnutritioned. So I think the first thing that the government must do, in addition to, of course, taking care of the cost of production, is fighting this drought. Now, in terms of drought, I come from an area where getting rainfall is getting manna from heaven, because the government now must find sustainable solutions in terms of tackling drought. We can't, year in, year out, you're always complaining of drought. So how do we mitigate and put in place policies that ensure that we have a sustainable approach when it comes to drought, in terms of harvesting rainwater, in terms of distributing water, in terms of integrating agriculture and livestock keeping and so on and so forth. So I think the government going forward, in terms of, in addition to reducing the cost of production, it must deal with emerging issues as they come.
And the Minister of Health, especially if you look at the CS who has been put in office, and Susan Nakhumicha, there was the contention that maybe that ministry deserved someone who perhaps understands and has been in the health sector, and people crying out loud why the current acting director general of health in the country, Amoth, was left out, and the ministry handed over to someone else, as well as also him missing on the PS position in that particular ministry, which has 2 state departments. What would be your conclusion in regards to that, leaving out a fully professional person who has been recognized by the global health organization that this is an asset that we need in our World Health Organization, and given the biggest opportunity to run affairs of the WHO. But when it comes back into our country, then it seems that that one is put aside, and then we focus on something different. Is that where we miss the point, or is it a matter of let's work our own way?
Let me take you back to a point I said earlier on, that Belio Kipsang is a person, if you can reward anyone for his hard work in any ministry, is Belio Kipsang. Dr. Amos, sadly enough, falls in that category, that we have the best of the brains in the country running some of these ministries, that we cannot recognize their efforts. But again, remember, these appointments were made by design. It wasn't by coincidence, it was by design, in the sense that if you are coming to a certain particular ministry with radical changes, then you must forget ever rising up the ladder and becoming a minister. If you are a foot soldier, you'll always remain a foot soldier. I mean, even in the defense forces, if you are a lance corporal or a general service officer, it's very hard for you to climb up the ladder and one day become a general, unless under very, by coincidence or under very strict circumstances where you had to show your brevity and so on and so forth. But as for Dr. Amos, I think that was by design. At the same time, you need people who have political mindset and not just technocrats, people who've been in the industry to come and make radical changes. You must need people who understand politics, who can withstand, who have the wherewithal to withstand the pressures that come with politics, who understand the dealings, political dealings involved in terms of running a ministry. But I'm sure if you had a professional coming, you'd see people have union rights, advocating for higher pay. That is something that government needs to or wants to control and keep under the carpet for a while.
Even as we come to a conclusion of this discussion, let's talk about the government going down to the devolved units, that is the 47 counties, and we've seen each and every conduct of the governors and as well. But let's take a look at or rather take a review of what has been happening throughout the week. There was a planned meeting by the Meru governor Kawira Mwangaza to sit with the MCAs and come to a truce of the ongoing conflict in regards to the county revenue and all that. They rejected 9 of his 10 CECs, or 11 of CECs that she had appointed. What do you make of this whole saga, and especially something that is expected? She's expected to serve for 5 years, but it's barely 3 months. What do you make of that, especially for the county governors who have come to office freshly?
I have said before that if Kawira is not really careful, she may be the first governor to ever be impeached in the first 100 days in office. I think Mwangaza needs to first relax and realize that she started on a bad foot. You need the MCAs. At some point you need the MCAs. I know there is that urge to show the bravado, that you cannot be intimidated and so on and so forth, but at some point you need the MCAs for the county government to work. I mean, there are the people who approve, as you said, the CECs. There are the people who approve most of these budgetary allocations in the county. So you need the MCAs. So I think for Kawira, she must go back. She was accused of nepotism and other, malpractices. She must go back to the drawing board, make those changes if necessary. I'm sure if her sister or her brother is qualified to hold a certain position, if they go through the right channels, I'm sure he or she will be able to get a job. But at some point, she must go back to the drawing board and say and look at the mistakes that she's made in terms of that has made her brush shoulders the wrong way with her MCAs. But at the same time, she must not fall prey to the demands of the MCAs. Remember, some of these politicians can be bullies, especially if you come off as a weak governor. So all in all, it is for her to sit down with the right advisors understand the mistakes that she has made. Remember, a leader who accepts the mistakes he has made, that is the strongest person you can ever see in leadership positions. So she must sit down, realize the mistakes she has made, accept those mistakes, amend those mistakes if possible, and start off the right foot, give herself a second chance with the MCAs. At the same time, maintain that bravado that she will not fall into the intimidations of her MCAs.
Mm-hmm. If you look at what she's trying to do, you know, she on her own admission, she's saying that I will not fall victim of misappropriation of public funds, and trying to, you know, sanitize herself from maybe perhaps what she knows was the previous her predecessors, you know, doings. Mm-hmm. And if you look at what has happened in other counties, especially on the previous governors, there is a lot of you know, misappropriation of funds that is coming out. You know, as we also conclude, what would be, you know, your final shot on the governors?
You see, taking the example of the Meru governor, there is nothing so tangible that she has done to say, I will not be intimidated. All she has done is make appointments that go against the Leadership Act of the Constitution. So for her to say that she's not afraid of impeachment by the MCAs is a reckless statement coming from a governor. Because the MCAs are very powerful. Remember, once a motion for an impeachment of a governor proceeds from, or rather is passed in the county assembly, it goes ahead to the Senate. And if you don't have allies in the Senate, maybe your own, it is very unfortunate for your own senator to disagree with you, then you will face the wrath of the MCAs. The MCAs are very powerful when it comes to devolved units. So I think for governors, they must ensure that at least it is always about, it is always a game of numbers. So if you have the majority in Bunge, in the county, then you have nothing to worry about. But if the MCAs reject 9 of your CECs, you must be a worried person.
Extremely worried.
Very worried.
I think that is where we're going to wind up this particular conversation. Thank you so much, you know, for making time this morning. Musa Sala is a communication strategist as well as a political commentator. Thank you for making time this morning, and hoping to have you again back soon for yet another different discussion. Maybe this time around the government will have performed much better. Right, and that is where we wind up this particular session of our State of the Nation discussion, highlighting matters that do deal with the Kenyan people. But up next, we'll be coming back with the entertainment segment. We have our guest artist, who is a producer of the Jawabu music production, Basil, will be coming up shortly. But as we take this particular short break, we'll be coming back with a taste of his music. Don't go far away. Stay with us.
Ninakuimbia Yesu we, una Mungu mwingine kama wewe. Ninakuimbia Yesu we, hakuna Mungu mwingine kama wewe. Pokea sifa, pokea sifa, pokea sifa tunazokupea. Ninakuimbia Yesu, hakuna Mungu mwingine kama wewe. Ninakuimbia Yesu, hakuna Mungu mwingine kama wewe. Pokea sifa tunazokupea. Pokea sifa tunazokupea. Kama Daudi alivyoimba, na kucheza na mimi hapa duniani sitabaki nyuma kama Daudi alivyoimba na kusifu na mimi hapa duniani sitabaki nyuma nitaimba na kusifu nitaruka na kucheza nitafanya samasoti kulitukuza jina lako nitakwenda kwa magoti nitaruka na kuketi nitafanya samasoti kulitukuza jina lako yo 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 nitasifu nitaimba kwa sababu kuna nguvu katika sifa. Haleluya. Ninakuimbia Yesu, hakuna Mungu mwingine kama wewe. Ninakuimbia Yesu.
Nitaitika,
Akiniita,
nitaitika,
akiniita,
nitaitika, nitafanya kazi ya Bwana. Nitafanya, fanya kazi, fanya kazi, fanya kazi ya Bwana. Nitafanya, fanya kazi, fanya kazi, fanya kazi ya Bwana.
Christmas already here at Kirk TV, the season of cheer and goodies. Are you a church organization and would like to air your end of year and New Year services? Are you thinking of reaching a wider audience and showcasing your Christmas cantatas and concerts? Have you thought about showcasing your Sunday school services to the entire country? Then, Kirk TV is offering you the end year advert bonanza. We will cover and broadcast all the above events at up to 50% off our normal rates starting this October till January 2023. Usiwachwe nyuma hii Krisi. Call our sales team now on 0738 278 506 or 0739 971 607. Send an email bnkogie@kirktv.org or munyoroku@kirktv.org for more information. Hurry and book now. Pamoja tuvuke mwaka. It's the Kirk TV End Year New Year Advert Bonanza.
Kirk TV presents a PCMF commissioning service this Sunday, the 6th of November 2022, which will be held at the PCA Kingongo Parish, Kingongo Church. The host minister will be Reverend Patrick Kamathi and the presiding minister will be Reverend Henry Kaira. The event will be live only on Kirk TV starting from 8:30 a.m.
Accidents happen with no warning and little time to prepare you for the related costs. An accident insurance cover will protect you from the financial burden that comes when you are indisposable. At Kirk Insurance Agency, we will guide you to an accident cover that will suit your needs and your pockets. Call us now on 0700-161-262 or 0780-203-203. Email us kirkinsurance@pcea.or.ke. Kirk Insurance, a step into comfort and peace.
Jawabu Studios.
Hey, amenambia nitulie. Hey, amenahidi nisubiri. Hey, amenambia nitulie. Hey, amenahidi nisubiri. Kwani anajua yote nayohitaji. Kwani anajua yote nayohitaji. Tulia, 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 we relax. Achana na stress za dunia, lenga. Tulia, 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 we relax. Achana na stress za dunia, lenga. Obulamu bwange buli makono keke, keke. Obulamu bubu buli makono keke, keke. Na shida zikizidi wewe subiri kwake. Mateso yakijaa wewe subiri kwake. Ugonjwa ukizidi wewe subiri kwake. Watesi wakizidi wewe subiri kwake. Atulia, tulia, tulia, tulia. Relax, 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 relax. Atulia, tulia, tulia, tulia. Hey, amenambia nitulie. Hey, amenahidi nisubiri. Hey, amenambia nitulie. Hey, amenahidi nisubiri. Kwani anajua yote nayohitaji. Kwani anajua yote nayohitaji. Haijalishi yote napitia. Haijalishi mateso napitia. Haijalishi yote napitia. Haijalishi shida napitia. Oh, relax, relax, relax. Achana na stress za dunia. Relax, relax, relax. Achana na stress za dunia. Shida ni za muda tu. Mateso ni ya muda tu. Mapito ni ya muda tu. Yote ni ya muda tu. Lego. Hey, hey. Amenambia nitulie. Hey, amenahidi nisubiri. Hey, amenambia nitulie. Hey, amenahidi nisubiri. Kwani anajua yote nayohitaji. Kwani anajua yote nayohitaji. Nego aliahidi naye atatenda. Aliahidi naye atatenda. Sina stress za maisha, sina stress za maisha, sina pressure za maisha, sina pressure za maisha. Baraka zake ziko kwenye foleni. Baraka zake ziko kwenye foleni. Hey, amenambia nitulie. Hey, amenahidi nisubiri. Hey, amenambia nitulie. Hey, amenahidi nisubiri. Kwani anajua yote nayohitaji. Kwani anajua yote nayohitaji.
No, hapana. Basi sawa naenda bro. Sawa naenda bro.
Jawabu Studios.
linasema anayajua vema mawazo aliyonayo Mungu kwangu. Neno linasema anayajua vema mawazo aliyonayo Mungu kwangu. Na tena amenichora viganjani mwake Yesu, Yesu, oh. Na tena amenichora viganjani mwake Yesu, Yesu, oh. Ya nini ning'ang'ane, ya nini nisumbuke, nikiwa naye Yesu kila kitu ni sawa. Ya nini ning'ang'ane, ya nini nisumbuke, nikiwa naye Yesu mambo yote ni sawa. Oh, sawa, sawa, oh, sawa, le, oh, sawa, yeah. Sawa kiwa enzini. Nilijaribu kule, walinishawishi wale, bila kujua kumbe napotea. Oh. Na kipindi kile sikumwona yeyote yule wakunishika mkono nilipochechemea. Nachojua leo watapata mshangao, utakayotenda hawatategemea. Utawashusha vyeo ili unipe heshima. Mungu wewe, Yesu wewe, Baba wewe, la 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 la. Sawa, 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 yote ni sawa, sawa, yatakuwa sawa. Mume amekukimbia, sawa, sawa, yeah. Sawa, 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 yatakuwa sawa. Maisha yanasumbua, sawa, usikate tamaa, sawa. Umekosa kazi, sawa, yatakuwa sawa. Nakutia moyo mama, sawa, usili, sawa, usili, sawa. Yesu akiwa enzi, sawa, yatakuwa sawa. Kesho yako ipo, sawa, sawa, sawa. Hayo ni mapito tu, sawa, yatakuwa sawa. Yatima baba yako yupo, sawa, sawa, sawa. Usilie, sawa, yatakuwa sawa. Mume amekukimbia, sawa, sema sawa, sawa. Haikuwa riziki yako, sawa, yatakuwa sawa. Najua siku moja ipo, sawa, utafutwa machozi, sawa, utasahau mateso, sawa, hey, yatakuwa sawa.
Studios.
Rozi Muando na kiongozi.
Mungu akikwambia fanya, fanya, inuka ufanye. Kisema nenda kule, fanya, inuka ufanye. Mungu akikwambia fanya, fanya, inuka ufanye. Akikwambia fanya kile, fanya, nenda ufanye. Akikwambia inuka, inuka, fanya, inuka na ufanye. Akikwambia nenda kule, fanya, inuka ufanye.
Akisema fanya, fanya, nenda fanya, usisubiri kafanye, fanya. Ujasiri wa sawa na utajiri wako, uoga wako sawa na umasikini wako, ujasiri wako sawa na utajiri wako, uoga wako sawa na umasikini wako. Nenda fanya, ama kafanye, kaka fanya, usiogope fanya, usingoje fanya, nenda fanya, wewe mama fanya. Unahisi kusaidia watu, unahisi kubariki watu, ni kama wataka kujenga nyumba, ni kama wataka kununua gari. Usitafute ushauri kwa watu, wengi watakuvunja moyo. Usitafute ushauri kwa watu, wengi wetu hatuaminiki.
Fanya,
nenda fanya, Rozi Muwando fanya, kiongozi fanya, Mungu akikutuma fanya, Olivia fanya, usiogope fanya, Hasani fanya, Mungu akisema fanya, ndani ya amani, usiogope fanya,
fanya mama, inuka na ufanye, fanya, neno la Mungu,
fanya.
Utii ni bora sana, na kusikia kuliko dhabihu. Nani aliyeelewa wakati wa mwanzo? Huyu anaitwa Mwana wa Mungu aliye hai. Neno lake ni amini na kweli. Huyu anaitwa Mesia. Neno lake lina nguvu ya kufanya. Mungu akikwambia fanya, inuka ufanye. Akisema nenda kule, inuka ufanye. Mungu akikwambia fanya, inuka ufanye. Akikwambia fanya kule,
Mungu akikuamurisha fanya, nenda fanya, usingoje baba, inuka, usisite, nenda fanya.
All right. Karibu tena. Welcome back again to Kirk in the morning as we get into the entertainment section. Niko na msanii hapa ndani ya studio, producer mkubwa Basil. Karibu sana kwenye studio.
Shukran.
Sijui umechelewa wapi, unaweza kutuambia nini imekubana? Tumekungoja kweli.
Ese mambo ya Kenya si unajua tena. Unapanga kwai unakuta mlolongo wa magari. Inabidi sasa utulie. Lakini kila jambo lina makusudi ya Mwenyezi Mungu.
Nashukuru sana na pia umefika. Mwanzo kabisa tuanze kwamba hiyo ngoma ambayo imetoka kucheza yako na Rozi Muwando, ikawaje unaweza kufanya kazi na wasanii wakubwa hivyo?
Ni neema ya Mungu kwanza. Manake kufikia hapo ni Mwenyezi Mungu. Siwezi sema ni kwa maarufu yangu au ni kwa ujanja wangu. Ila Rozi Muwando na mimi ni kama mama na mtoto au producer na msanii wake. Hizo vitu viwili.
Na tuanzie hapo, umesema producer wake, na hapo nimeona pia umefanya kazi na wasanii wengine wakubwa kutoka nchini Tanzania na hapa nchini. Lakini tuanzie mwanzo kabisa, safari yako ya usanii, maana wewe ni mwanamuziki na pia producer, ilianzia wapi, tukikimbizana pia na muda?
Musically I'm talented. Manake nilianza kucheza ala za muziki tangu niko darasa la kwanza. So ikakuwa kitu iko kwa damu. Nikawa nafunza music pia, makwaya, like muziki ikawa sasa it's me. So hivyo nikajikuta natamani niwe producer. Manake I used to do music in studios but not producing, but kucheza music. So nikatamani sana niwe producer, ama producer wakawa wananikazia sana kujua
kupata nafasi.
So I learned it in hard way, actually in a very hard way.
Hiyo hard way ndo utupe sasa tupate kabisa.
So ukakuta manake wenye walikuwa nifunza waliniitisha 1 million. Na sayo mimi sina hata pa kuishi. So nililia machozi sana. but nikawa naamini God. So I met someone ameajiriwa kwa studio mahali, akaniambia ikijulikana ananifunza atafutwa. So nilikuwa narauka pale saa 8 ya usiku. Just saa 8 ya usiku ananifunza kitu. Hii inafanywa hivi, so naenda kusoma kwa internet. So hivyo tu ikajipa.
Na mwanzo kabisa ngoma yako ya kwanza kuproduce ama wakati wenye uliproduce ngoma yako ya kwanza ilikuwa vipi? Hebu tupe taswira, ilikuwa aje wakati uliproduce ngoma yako ya kwanza?
My own song actually nilifanya nikifanya mtihani. So niko studio naimba na nangojea kufanya pepa ya mwisho, ilikuwa business. So nikakujua kwa studio na principal na maskari. Ndio nilifanya, nikamwambia ngojea niweke stanza ya mwisho.
Ukaweka?
Nikaweka, na hiyo ngoma ndio ilinipea studio. Inaitwa Vitabu Vitasomwa. Sijaiweka YouTube, but I'm planning to do a very big video and then niweke. Yeah, Vitabu Vitasomwa.
Vitabu Vitasomwa.
It was my first song and a very big song.
So tupe akapela hiyo.
Akapela. Actually ni ngoma tu inasema about the books that will be open during the Judge Day. Vitabu vitasomwa, vitabu vya matendo vitasomwa. Wale watu tunakutana kwa makrusedi wanaipenda sana. Na ndio ngoma nilimba mahali Apostle akaguswa na mimi sana. Alikuwa analipa wasanii ile pesa wameagree. We never agreed any amount, but nilipoimba wimbo aliguswa sana. He wrote me a check of 350,000 kuimba siku 3 hiyo song. Yeah.
Hapo ndo maisha yako.
Hapo ndio nikajicompose, nikaongezea kidogo, nikaongezea ala za muziki. Umeelewa sasa?
Producer wangu kwa masikio Vincent anasema hiyo ngoma ilivuma sana siku.
Anaijua. Asante sana, shukrani.
Ilivuma sana sio kimao.
Ilivuma ikafanya watu watakaye kujua umse ameimba. You know, it's a very serious message. Ukisikiza inabidi ukae chini unisikize. Ni message, it is not a compromising message, and it has got sweet melody also, but message yake it's very serious. So ukisikia nikiimba itabidi tu usikize, usimame usikize. Nikiimba kwa crusade ama somewhere inabidi hata wenye wanapita wasimame kwanza wasikize hiyo kitu.
Na nimekuwa nikiangalia kwenye video zako za muziki, naona kuna hizo moves zenye unatupa hapa.
Yeah. Actually generally I'm a performer, I'm a dancer, I'm a producer, I'm a singer, I'm a worshiper. Yeah.
Na unajua si rahisi kwamba kufanya kazi pia na wasanii ambao ni wakubwa, manake pia unapata wako slippery sana. Wewe ikakuaje kufanya kazi na wasanii hao wakubwa hivyo, Sampuli ya Rose Mwando, kufanya Martha Mwipaja, na pia na Commando?
Ni unaona sasa venye God amekupatia hii neema, you can interview anybody, including president. So ni neema Mungu anakupeaga. When I meet these guys, unakutanga wao wenyewe kwanza ndio wanastuka, like inawafanyia job. Unaget? Ringtone bado yeye kuja studio na unakuta tuna cooperate, hatugombani, hakuna ile tense juu hizo. Niyo tu neema. Na kwa studio yangu akuja msanii hajawahi imba bado namchukulia ni celeb. Kukuja celeb na mchukulia bado ndio anaanza. So ndio tumenisaidia.
Kuna watu labda wanaweza kuwa kishangaa eti nani tuko naye kwenye studio. Unajua kama ni kuna kale ka sauti ka Jawabu
Studios.
Nani anatoa kwa sauti? Ni wewe?
So Jawabu Studios is my studio, but my names are Basil or John Basil Siali. So Jawabu Studios hiyo ni signature ya studio yangu. Ukisikia tu ngoma ile inaanza Jawabu Studios, unajua hiyo ni signature.
Unajua umetoka kwenye Basil. Haya, hivyo umezungumzia kufanya kazi na wasanii wakubwa na pia kina Rose Mwando, Martha Mwipaja pia mmemfanyia kazi, lakini kuna ngoma yako ambayo umetoa na Commando.
Ya.
Hiyo ngoma
Commando Yesu alikuwa amekuja, nilikuwa nimemwitia kazi na msanii. Manake Mungu amenipa neema, mwimbaji yoyote akitaka any collabo from any country, Mungu amenipa neema ya kufikia msanii mwenye anahitajika. So I called Commando for a certain work. Na bahati mbaya tukiwa studio nikafungua hiyo wimbo yangu. Commando akaisikiza akasema, mwanangu wimbo ni nzuri. Nilikuwa nimemaliza, tafadhali naomba tuimbe na wewe. Kaambia ina shida, tuimbe, ni kazi ya Mungu. Na ukakuta hiyo wimbo imetoka poa. Idea yenyewe nilikuwa nayo, yeye akaleta yake tukacombine. Ngoma ikawa nzuri.
Nafikiri tunaweza kuisikiza tu kidogo alafu tuendelee.
Amenichora viganjani mwake, Yesu, Yesu, oh. Na tena amenichora viganjani mwake. Yesu, Yesu, oh. Ya nini ning'ang'ane, ya nini nisumbuke, nikiwa naye Yesu kila kitu ni sawa. Ya nini ning'ang'ane, ya nini nisumbuke, nikiwa naye Yesu mambo yote ni sawa. Oh. Sawa, sawa, oh, sawa, le. Oh, sawa, yeah. Sawa kiwa enzini. Nilijaribu kule, walinishawishi wale, bila kujua kumbe napotea. Oh. Na kipindi kile sikumwona yeyote yule wakunishika mkono nilipochechemea. Nachojua leo watapata mshangao, utakayotenda hawatategemea. Utawashusha vyeo ili unipe heshima. Mungu wewe, Yesu wewe, Baba wewe, la 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 la. Sawa, 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 yote ni sawa, sawa, yatakuwa sawa. Mume amekukimbia, sawa, sawa, yeah. Sawa, 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 yatakuwa sawa.
Kama fresh kabisa. Kufanya kazi na Komando, kwamba pia kulikuwa najua ni msanii mkubwa na msanii ameheshimika. Wewe kufanya kazi na yeye ulijifunza nini, ama how was the experience working with Komando on that song?
Ako very humble, and then ni mtu wa kusikiza. Alafu kingine nilipenda sasa, yeye alikuwa ananisikiza mimi Kenya nasema. Like nikimwambia hapa tufanye hivi anakubali, apingi. Alafu wimbo ulimbariki yeye kwanza hata before tuimbe. Maana nilikuwa nimeurecord. Ni kama wimbo fulani nimeimba na Rose Mando, ninamwamini Mungu wa majira. Pia Rose alipata nimeshaumaliza wimbo. Aliposikiza kusema mwanangu wimbo umenigusa, naomba niweke sauti. Ikawa hivyo. So Komando pia alipata wimbo nimeshauimba.
Akachukua stanza kadhaa,
nikampa stanza tukacombine.
Ikakuwa fresh kabisa.
Kabisa.
Na challenge kubwa ambayo unajua kukuwa msanii na kukuwa producer, challenge kubwa gani una experience wewe kama kwa pande zote mbili? Being an artist
and a
producer at the same time.
Now time ya kufanya kazi yako inakuwa so limited. Na unakuta pia unaweza sahau nyimbo zako, ukute umeconcentrate sana na za ma clients. But me nashukuru Mungu na try sana, huwa naamka 4 daily. Like leo nilikuwa studio saa 10. Maana nilikuwa nimepiga timing nitoke saa 1 niko hapa. Yeah. So daily saa 10 ndio kama kuna ngoma yangu nifanye kuanzia 5 mpaka 7. So kuanzia saa 2 nishike za ma clients. Yeah.
Na kukuwa sema producer, unasema kwamba the biggest challenge sometimes pia ni hiyo kubalance between ngoma zako na za client. Changamoto gani kubwa ambayo kwanza you encounter, being a producer na kudili na pia wasanii wakubwa? Manake nilizungumza mwingine anasema saa zingine wanasumbua sana, sema kwamba wamefanya kazi na Rington.
Yeah, initially mimi wanajua mimi ni mkali. Clients wangu wote ukiwauliza utasema yule jamani mkali, lakini kazi ni nzuri. Kwa nini naekaga sura ya kazi? Ndio mazoea yasiingie. Maana the moment umekuwa soft, mtacheka, kalenda tangia mcheke mwanzo hadi mwisho na kazi itaharibika. Like you have to be that somehow serious. Wanasema manga. Yeah.
Sura ya kazi.
Like usi compromise juu ama after hit. Na yeye labda ako ya ile after tukue marafiki kazi. Mimi sasa sionagi like tuimbe tu. Naonanga hiyo ngoma yake ikisikika inipatie clients. So ile challenge kubwa ni wengi mnaweza bishana juu ya kitu fulani, unamwambia tufanye hivi, so unabaki wewe amekuchukia, but at the end of the day akishapata wimbo anakwambia kaka sikujua itakuwa hivi. Yeah, so
ngoma kali kabisa. Talking about that, let's talk about pia music yako. Unaona pia ngoma zako pia ni ngoma ambazo zinachangamsha, ngoma ambazo when you sing along unasikia pia ni muziki unaimba. How do you compose your songs? You interact with different artists. Na lazima wakicompose pia unakuwa affected.
Actually mimi I'm a composer. By professional, naandikia wasanii nyimbo wale wanahitaji. So zangu zinakujaga tu. Like leo nimepata ngoma nikiwa tu studio. The moment nimefungua studio yangu nitacheza piano, ni worship kwanza. So the moment tu nimeshika ile piano, kitu tu inakuja na naimba. Kama kuna wimbo imehit sana, nafikiri unajua. Wanauliza ulivukaje, ni Mungu alikuvusha we. Ilikuja tu nikiplay piano. Na nikaidharau. So nikiamka maombi saa 10 kwa hao sasa, nikaimba, TikTok nikaeka, nikasahau. Kumbe sikujua hiyo ngoma imeenda viral na imenipea
kuna clients,
ma clients, ma fans.
Hiyo lazima kila Mkenya amesikia. Tuzungumzie swali lingine hapa. Nilikuwa nazungumza na wasanii wengine, maana yake kiti ambacho wamekalia wengine kama afikia 30 ama 50. Na wote wanasema kwamba the biggest challenge huwa kubalance kati ya the gospel industry na ministry industry, that lazima ujitafutie riziki in whatever way, kwa sababu lazima usustain music yako, na pia kuna wengine wanasema kwamba lazima pia ufanye huduma. So ministry na industry, wewe muziki zako zina target wapi sasa?
Music lazima tujue music is a test. Yani music ni ladha, sio imani. Unaget? So wewe ukienda hotelini upewe chakula kizuri, mwanangu, kama kilikuwa cha shilingi 100, si uta appreciate ule waiter ama yule msamepika. So music ni ladha, sio imani. So ukishajua music ni taste, ladha, ni utaniita kwa chacha ama crusade niimbe hiyo taste ifurahishe wasee. Waseme pastor ameita msanii mzuri sana, ametubariki. What do you do next? Huyu pastor anafanya nini? Acheze kama yeye. Manake mimi tunasema wenyewe wataishi kwa imani, lakini tusi misinterpret. When you call me to minister, or when you see me doing music in my YouTube, hata hizo ngoma kufika YouTube sio imani, ni do. Video yangu ile ya chini sana nimespend 80k.
80,000.
Ile bad quality.
80,000. Na kuna wengine wanaspend pia fikia milioni.
So pastor akisema kuja tutumikie Mungu anakosea maandiko.
Anafaa afanye nini? So
music ni industry. Music yote. Sasa hii gospel sijui nini, hizo ni majina sisi tuna categorize. Juu hakuna mahali Bible inasema gospel music. Ni nyimbo. Music is music. But God kwa Bible kuna mahali inasema make to him skillfully music. Unaelewa? So music ikiwa kama test, so inafanyika industry. So where there is industry there is income. Au sio? Ama nakosea?
Na kupata vizuri kabisa.
So hivyo tunaishi. Although mimi ukiniita mkutano atu negotiate kwa simu, mimi alikama and minister, pia nione kama unajali. Kama utajali ukiniita nitakwambia niko maombi mahali siwezi kuja.
Hivyo kwa wale ambao wenye hawafanyi ama wachezi kiwao, manake I've spoken to many artists na pia anasema kuna wengine unakuja una perform alafu na tumpe makofi 3 4.
No, hiyo ni nitasemaje? Hiyo ni kunipluff. Inaitwa kupluff. Inaitwa hivyo. Yani hiyo ni kunifunika ki style fulani hivi. I need to wear, I need to eat. Kiniita mkutano siku 3. Si unaona hizo siku 3 ningeunda beat tu. Nitumie msanii kwa US juu niko na maclient US. Na watumia beat, wana compose, wanatuma, naunda hivyo. So hizo siku 3 naweza unda beat 30 nikiwatumia. Hiyo ni domob, na wala kwa US wanawalipisha 25k per song. So unaponiita kwako siku 3 bwana, you just have to use knowledge ya God, ya Holy Spirit. Ujue huyu ni msee, huyu si malaika.
All right, I think hiyo ni fair enough. It's a fair point. Yenye Tanzania anafaa kuwa anajaliwa. Tuongelee plan zako za muziki, tukimalizia plan zako za muziki, plan zako pia za production. Tutarajie nini kutoka kwako?
Napenda kwenda hivi. So mimi wa jana si wa leo. So always I do. Napenda muziki yangu ya jana isikuwe ya leo. So kwa mfano studio nimefungua last year studio Mombasa. Na main inakuaga Machakos. But sasa hiyo main naileta Nairobi. Na sasa hii inaendelea kujengwa. By Monday itakuwa imeingia. So mimi ni mtu wa
kupanga ngazi.
So like saizi naumisha kichwa, I'm going nikifanya ngoma za kila tribe Kenya. Unaelewa? So nataka tu nikamate muziki. Ukienda left right unasikia tu Basil. Lazima usikie tu ngoma zangu. Like jana nilikuwa napita place mzee mwingine akasema, "Ni wewe nilikuwa na kwa TikTok." Nikamwambia ngoma gani? Nikamwambia ni mimi mzee. So najitazamia like ukute niko tu everywhere in music.
Kwamba kazi yako inashikilia kila mahali.
Na
watu wanaokutafuta wasanii ama wote wanaokutafuta wanaweza wakakupata wapi, na pia utupe social media zako tukimalizia.
Na pale YouTube kama unataka kuwatch nyimbo zangu na kukua my follower ni una search tu Basil. Basil. Kama wewe ni mwimbaji ungependa kunifikia ama pastor unapiga namba yangu ile ambayo inapatikana 24/7 ni 0714 555 601. Hiyo ndio namba yenye inaingia usiku, mchana, asubuhi.
Instagram, Facebook
ni Basil Siali, but YouTube ni Basil. Haya basi, tunashukuru sana kwa kukuja pia asubuhi. Sijui producer wangu anasema tumalize na ngoma gani? Wauliza ulivukaje? Mungu alikuvusha we.
Mimi nakupa stage Basil. Ulivukaje? Mungu. Patane tena next Friday.
Thank you. We will come.
Different place.
Asante.
Twende kazi.
Alikokutoa Mungu we. Sisahau safari iliyokuwa ngumu wewe.
Yes.
Kumbuka alikokuvusha Mungu we. Usisahau mawimbi yalivyokuwa mengi wewe. Naelewa shida zilizidi kwako sana we. Ila usisahau alikokutoa Mungu wako we. Naelewa walikutesa sana sana we. Ila usisahau alikokutoa Mungu wako we. Naelewa leo waendesha magari makubwa sana. Ila usisahau alikokutoa Mungu wako we. Wauliza ulivukaje? Ni Mungu alikuvusha we. Uliwezaje? Mungu kakuwezesha we. Ulishindaje jaribu kakushindia we. Uliponaje? Mungu alikuponya we. Umeinuka vipi? Mungu alikuinua we. Wale walitamani ufie mbali we. Walitamani uteseke sana wewe. Walitamani uzidi kuwaomba tena wasikie umefungiwa nyumba. Watoto wako shuleni hawaendi. Umebaki mjane wewe. Umefiwa na kila mtu ili wafurahie juu ya maisha yako, tena washerekee juu ya taabu zako. Ila Mungu wa huruma, ila Mungu ni Mungu wa rehema. Alitegua mitego yao mbaya, alitegua mitego yao mbaya. Ni Mungu kakuwezesha we. Ulishindaje jaribu kakushindia we. Uliponaje Mungu alikuponya we. Umeinuka vipi Mungu alikuinua we. Uliza ulivukaje ni Mungu alikuvusha we. Uliwezaje Mungu kakuwezesha we. Ulishindaje jaribu kakushindia we. Uliponaje Mungu alikuponya we. Umeinuka vipi Mungu alikuinua we.
Jawabu Studios.